Hi, y'all. Happy Friday. I wanted to talk to y'all about making time for your self care because in my group, I have gotten a lot of feedback about how one of the biggest barriers or challenge to self care is finding the time for it or making the time for it. And I have been sitting on that and kind of thinking about that a little bit because I totally get it, right? We're really busy, even with the way everything looks right now. We're all still really, really busy. So it's hard to add in this other thing that you need to make time for. Also, one thing that I want you to avoid with self care is putting more things on your to do list that stress you out. So that's not helpful. So I have kind of two different avenues of how to help with this making time for self care. One I kind of see as like the coach, like self care that's going to kind of motivate you, and one is more the counselor take on it, which of course is where is my favorite. But for the coach's sake, first is make time for your self-care. Make it an appointment in your calendar. Schedule it in every day and see if you can do that. If you can't quite do that yet, schedule in 1 hour a week. That's it. I mean, if you can only make 30 minutes, then that's more than nothing, right? So schedule in, take out your calendar right now and find an hour over the next 7 days that you can use to do something purely for yourself. That's kind of the coach's take on it. And then don't cancel that appointment, right? You wouldn't cancel on a really good friend that needed an hour to sit and vent with you. You wouldn't cancel on a friend who said, hey, I really need blah, 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 and you agreed to it. So why would you cancel on yourself? That's not fair. Be your best friend. Be your own best friend. Don't cancel on yourself and make that time. That's the coach-like one, right? I think that's helpful. That's how I have to do it. I write down my workout routine in my calendar and show it. I tell my husband what my plan is, and then I've recently started sending a picture of it to my sister-in-law to help hold me accountable. And I don't always, I don't make it every day, but it's much more likely to happen if it's scheduled into my calendar already because it's an appointment. It's in there. The time for it is scheduled. So that's that time. Then the counselor side is going to get a little bit cheesy. I might get a little bit dorky about it, but I think it's really beneficial. So I'm going to kind of give you a metaphor about making time for your self-care. And that metaphor is treating your self-care the same way that you treat driving and owning your car. And now what that means is there are some things that we have to do with our car every single time we get in it to go somewhere. There are some things we have to do occasionally with our car, and then there's some things that we have to do super rarely, but they're really important. So let's start from the beginning with that, right? So your seatbelt. You have to put on your seatbelt every time, and I hope nowadays that that's something that you don't even think about doing. You get in your car, turn it on, put your seatbelt on, and you go, right? I don't schedule in time to put on my seatbelt. Just do it. It's part of the commute. It's part of the drive. It's all that it is, right? And then the other thing about my seatbelt is it keeps me safe. It's the stuff that, it's one of the most important parts of my car, other than like the brakes. And I would kind of see that level of self-care being like deep breathing exercises, drinking water and staying hydrated throughout the day, monitoring your self-talk and making sure that your self-talk is empowering rather than tearing you down. Maybe if your self-talk is a place where you struggle, working to flip those thoughts around and making them empowering. There could be other things here too that are like maybe meditation if that's a thing that you're into, but things that you can make as habitual as possible or as habitual as putting on your seatbelt. So if that is something that you think you could do, maybe you can tie it to a habit that you already have. So maybe every time you put on your seatbelt, you take 3 deep breaths. Maybe every time you wash your hands, you do a mindfulness exercise and you think about how the water feels on your hands and how the soap smells and blah, blah, blah. I could go on about mindfulness. That's a whole other talk. Maybe when you hear yourself, you're just going through your normal day, and when you hear yourself say something negative about yourself, you say, whoa, 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 stop, and you flip it. You don't have to make time for that. You just do that. Our brains are really fast. You just do that. So try to find something that you want to do for self-care that you can make habitual, or you can add to a habit that's already happening. Then the next level of kind of time commitment is, just like we have to fill our tank up with gas, maybe once a week, maybe less than that with less driving, maybe more than that with more driving. Listen to that part. There's some self-care that's going to be routine, but not every single day. And so that part that I pointed out is, if you are doing more, if you are adding more, if there's a particularly stressful thing going on, your self-care is going to need to go up. So just like you drive your car more, you put more gas in it. If you are driving yourself more, you need to put in more self-care to keep yourself fueled. So what does that look like? It could be different for every single person, right? There was a time, I guess a year ago, where I every month got a manicure because it felt good. It was my way to treat myself. I'm not doing that right now. Haven't done that since the pandemic. Probably not going to do that moving forward because it's expensive. But it was something that I did routinely, only for myself. I was the only benefit out of that. Or me feeling good was the only benefit. But there are other things that could be kind of like fueling your tank. Maybe for you, that's meal prepping on Sundays. Maybe for you, that's your workout routine. Maybe it's talking with a friend that you need to talk to routinely to kind of, keep yourself sane. Whatever that is that you need to do, not every single day, but make it a routine, right? Because I hate when I get in my car and the tank is on empty and I didn't think about it. And so I'm on my way to wherever I'm going and I left just enough time to get there. And I didn't calculate in time for putting in gas. But really, when I put in gas, I might be 5 minutes late. It's not a huge amount of time, but it's a very important amount of time for me to be able to get where I'm going. So focus on routine. Routine would be your fueling your tank with gas. The next level of time commitment would be the oil change or the tire rotation or the tune-up or whatever you need to take your car in. Those appointments, even if you have an appointment, can take hours and hours and hours. They maybe only happen a few times a year, but they're really important to help us keep going. So the things that I see on that level of self-care might be taking a vacation from work, taking maybe a couple of mini vacations throughout the year. Maybe it's going to your yearly or annual doctor's appointments. Maybe for you, it's like spring cleaning, if that makes you feel really good. Other things like that that are going to take a serious time commitment that you really have to kind of plan for. Then, now this is my super geeky counselor favorite one, is the flat tire. So when you have a flat tire and you're driving, you really can't keep going, right? Especially if it was like a blowout. You can't keep driving on that because your wheel's going to get damaged. If you have a flat tire and it's just sort of slowly leaking air, maybe you have time to drive it to discount tire or whatever you need to do. Or maybe you're broken down on the side of the road. It's not quite a blowout, but you do have to call roadside assistance, or you have to call a tow truck. Or if you are talented and can get out of the car and change the tire, more power to you, but you have to do that. You can't just keep driving and keep going where you are and say, no, I'm fine, right? So the same way that we have to take care of a flat tire in the moment is the same way that we have to kind of regulate our emotions as they come. It's really difficult if we have a big emotion like anger or upset or disappointment or whatever. I could list emotions, there's a ton. But when those happen, we can't just push through and say, I'm just going to ignore it, I'm just going to ignore it, I'm just going to ignore it and keep going, because that can be more damaging, just like driving on a flat tire. So there might be some emotional regulation things that you have to kind of teach yourself to do in order to deal with those or to process those. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, there are times where you can't fully deal with an emotion because of something else that's going on. Having a toddler makes that very clear. Because there are times when I have a big emotion, but he needs something. And so I can't sit there and, go on a 30-minute walk if I'm home with him by myself, I got to take care of him. So there might be some times where you have to say, okay, I'm going to honor this feeling. I'm going to give myself some self-love, some self-compassion. I'm going to say how hard this is and just acknowledge that these feelings kind of suck or they don't feel good. And then later on, I'm going to work on processing it. But still, honoring that feeling in the moment was me dealing with my flat tire of my emotion. And then if you do have time to look at it, like if you're at work and something happens that's super frustrating, you got to do something to get past that frustration, to get through that frustration, whether that's doing a deep breathing exercise, whether it's taking a 5-minute break, whatever it is, in order to make your afternoon better, to get past that feeling of that emotion. I count that as self-care. Emotional regulation is self-care. It's us taking care of ourselves, right? So there are kind of this like hierarchy of time commitments when it comes to self-care. The foundation, the seatbelt, then, filling your tank with gas, then the stuff that, takes some time, but you have to do it, you have to do it, and then the kind of blow up times. So I wanted to just share that because I think it helps put into perspective that yes, self-care can take time. Absolutely, it can take time depending on what you need. But also, self-care can be something that is so habitual that you are just taking the time to make the intention and commit to that intention. And that can make a world of difference if you focus on those things that are as habitual as putting on your seatbelt. So if that was helpful, I really hope it was. If you want to make a self-care plan for the next season ahead of you, whatever that looks like, please go to Etsy and download my self-care guide. I will put a link to it as well. But it will help walk you through that. And now that you have this metaphor going on too, it can kind of put into perspective the time commitments that you can make in your plan while going through that guide. So I'll put a link to that. Go get it if you need it. My Facebook group is called Self-Care for the Holiday Hustle. I'm going to be doing more deep dives in there every Friday, just like this. And then we're also going to be walking through the book together. So it's going to be a great investment of your time in your own self-care and hopefully get you through the holidays and then into the next quarter of 2021 where we get to start over with more self-care. What's that going to look like? What are our lives going to look like in 2021? Not really sure at this point, but I know we're going to need a self-care plan for it. So thank you guys.